Deep beneath the Nevada desert, within a complex known to a select few by the codename Area 52, a sterile silence reigned, broken only by the low hum of life support and ventilation systems. Inside the command center, bathed in the cold glow of tactical displays, Captain Vincent Demarco received the alert. The message was brief, fragmented, devoid of standard protocols. A small logging town, nestled somewhere in the dense forests of South Carolina, had gone dark hours ago. The last recorded transmissions were a chaotic burst of noise, fragments of screams, panicked shouts, and garbled mention of unnaturally large wolves. Satellite imagery confirmed a total power outage in the town and surrounding areas. Communications were dead across all civilian and most military frequencies. High-resolution thermal scanners painted a bizarre picture. Multiple rapidly moving heat signatures converging on the town and the surrounding woods, their size and speed inconsistent with any known animal species. Soon, Demarco stood before the massive screen in Area 52's Situation Room. The air was thick with anticipation. Analysts from the Xenothreat Division presented the gathered intelligence. The thermal signatures, the movement patterns, the fragmented messages, everything pointed to a Lycanthrope-class event. Archival files were displayed, showing rare past encounters with similar entities, scattered across decades and continents. Special emphasis was placed on the potential sentience of this particular strain, their capacity for organization, and primitive pack tactics. These were not the mythical creatures of Hollywood films, but a Tier 1 biological threat, a species capable of adaptation and posing an existential danger to isolated communities. Protocol Sawmill was activated. In an adjacent bay, the staging hangar for Special Operations Teams, Squad 734, known internally as Night Watch, was assembling. Sergeant Michael Rock Johnson, a massive man with years of operational experience, checked the feed system of his heavy support machine gun. Lieutenant Eva Banshee Novak, the team's communications and electronic warfare specialist, also a qualified field medic, calibrated the scanners and comms suite integrated into her exoskeleton's forearm. Specialist Jake Ghost Riley, the squad sniper and scout, silently cleaned the optics of his large-caliber rifle. Corporal Carlos Smith Hernandez, engineer and tech specialist, ran final diagnostics on the Cerberus MK-3 combat exoskeletons, his fingers flying across the touch panels of a diagnostic tablet. Their movements possessed the practiced synchronicity of an elite unit, yet beneath it lay a palpable tension, the apprehension before facing an unknown and lethal adversary. Captain Demarco entered the hangar. His presence commanded immediate attention. Unlike his soldiers, he required no exoskeleton. His physical capabilities exceeded any mechanical enhancement. Tall, lean, with a face that might have seemed young if not for the eyes. Eyes that held the weight of centuries spent battling creatures the modern world dismissed as myth. His movements were fluid, predatory. He wore a light ballistic vest over a dark tactical uniform. On his hip rested a holster containing a modified heavy-caliber pistol, its grip inlaid with tarnished silver. Strapped to his back, in a custom sheath, lay an ancient sword, its blade etched with faint runic symbols. He approached the weapons table, checked his pistol, loading it with heavy rounds featuring silver cores. His calm was almost inhuman, a stark contrast to the coiled energy of his team. He was a relic, an ancient warrior sworn to a modern government in exchange for resources and the opportunity to continue his eternal war. The soldiers began donning their Cerberus exoskeletons. The process was honed to automaticity. Heavy segments of composite armor clicked shut with satisfying thuds. Servos whirred softly to life. Hernandez personally verified the seals on each suit, the fit of the helmets, the function of life support and sensor arrays. Thermal imagers, night vision optics, short-range sonar, bioscanners. Everything had to be flawless. Insertion tactics were discussed. Deployment at a significant distance, covert approach, radio silence protocols. The rules of engagement were stark. Neutralization of confirmed threats was paramount. Minimizing collateral damage was desirable but secondary. Rescue of any survivors was deferred until a full tactical assessment could be made. The squad's arsenal was specifically chosen for engaging an enemy possessing high durability and regenerative abilities. Automatic rifles chambered in .338 Norma Magnum for maximum penetration. Johnson's machine guns were fed belts of silver-cored ammunition. Underslung grenade launchers carried high-intensity UV flare rounds, sonic grenades, and canisters deploying silver shrapnel. Riley's sniper rifle was equipped with advanced thermal optics and a ballistic computer capable of calculating the unique trajectories of heavy silver slugs. Demarco himself carried unique custom-developed grenades and ammunition proven effective over centuries. Final preparations complete, the squad moved towards the V-44 Night Ghost stealth tiltrotor waiting on the subterranean launch pad. The soldiers took their seats in the troop bay. The ramp closed silently, sealing off the hangar's light. A tense quiet settled within, broken only by the thrum of the tiltrotor's engines as it ascended through a hidden exit to the surface. Demarco scanned his soldiers, their faces hidden behind tinted helmet visors. He spoke no words. They knew the mission. The tiltrotor banked, heading toward South Carolina, flying nap of the earth to evade civilian air traffic control. The sense of impending conflict, dangerous and unpredictable, was almost a physical presence in the confined space of the troop bay. The V-44 hovered motionless above the pine canopy roughly 6 miles from the town's edge. Its engines operated in low acoustic mode, their whine dissolving into the rustle of the night forest. A hatch opened in the troop bay floor, and thick synthetic ropes snaked down. One by one, the members of Squad 734, clad in their Cerberus exoskeletons, rappelled down, their movements swift and precise. They landed almost silently on the soft pine needle bedding, thanks to the suit's shock absorbers and their practiced descent techniques. As the last soldier touched ground, the ropes retracted, the hatch sealed, and the tiltrotor, making no unnecessary sound, melted back into the night sky, leaving the squad alone in hostile territory. They immediately formed a tactical diamond, ensuring 360-degree observation and defense. Captain Demarco took point. His senses, honed to superhuman levels, scanned the surroundings more effectively than any electronic sensor. He moved without a sound, his steps light on the forest floor, while the footfalls of the soldiers in their exoskeletons, despite all technological refinements, produced a muffled but discernible mechanical crunch. The suits allowed them to carry hundreds of pounds of gear without fatigue, but true silence in the woods remained elusive. Demarco caught a faint scent on the still night air, a mixture of decaying leaves, damp earth, fear, and something else. Wild, primal, with the metallic tang of fresh blood. He gave a hand signal, and the squad moved forward, plunging into the deep darkness beneath the tree canopy. Progress was slow, methodical. Riley periodically used his thermal scope to scan ahead, but the dense foliage created significant interference. Demarco made the first find. He stopped beside the mangled carcass of a deer. The animal had been literally torn apart with unnatural force. Marks from huge claws scarred the bark of nearby trees as if something had been sharpening them. A few 100 yards further on, they came upon the remains of a large black bear, killed with the same incredible brutality. This was unlike the work of any normal predator. Then, on an abandoned logging road, they found the pickup truck. It sat at an unnatural angle, one side crushed inward. Both doors had been ripped from their hinges with monstrous strength. The cab's interior was drenched in blood. On the passenger seat lay a shattered cell phone and a child's drawing depicting a disproportionately large, fanged wolf standing on its hind legs. Around the truck, the ground was churned by gigantic paw prints, resembling a wolf's but significantly larger. The tracks led deeper into the woods, towards the town. Lieutenant Novak suddenly reported over the internal comms. "Captain, picking up strange interference. Short bursts across comm frequencies. Bioscanners are unstable too. Signatures phasing in and out, like something's passing through them." She barely finished speaking when the forest erupted in motion. 3 massive figures burst from the dense undergrowth on both sides of the trail. They moved with incredible speed, low to the ground. These were not wolves. They were bipedal creatures, covered in thick, dark fur, with elongated muzzles filled with sharp teeth, and long claws on their hands and feet. Their eyes burned with yellow fire in the beams of the tactical lights that instantly flared to life on the soldiers' helmets. The attack was ferocious and targeted, designed to break their formation and isolate the soldiers. The squad reacted instantly, their extensive training for such scenarios kicking in. The exoskeletons allowed them to withstand the initial impact. Sergeant Johnson threw one of the attackers back with a powerful blow from his Cerberus's hydraulic arm. Composite armor held against glancing claw strikes, leaving deep gouges. The automatic rifles and Johnson's machine gun opened up, the air filled with the roar of gunfire. The silver-cored rounds clearly inflicted pain. The creatures snarled and flinched when hit, but their resilience was astonishing. One monster, taking multiple hits to the chest, only staggered before lunging forward again. Captain Demarco moved into the thick of the fight. He moved with a blurred speed invisible to the human eye. His pistol spat fire, sending silver slugs accurately into heads and chests. The ancient sword flashed in the dim light, severing limbs and inflicting deep wounds. The attackers weren't acting randomly. Their tactics were primitive but effective. One drew the bulk of the fire while the other 2 attempted flanking maneuvers, using trees and brush for cover. They leaped with incredible agility, attacking from above, aiming for the exoskeleton's joints and optical sensors. Their speed and maneuverability in the dense woods were a distinct advantage. The fight was brief but brutal. One creature felled by a precise headshot from Demarco. The other 2, sustaining multiple injuries, suddenly broke off the attack and retreated with the same incredible speed, vanishing into the forest darkness. Silence, broken only by the heavy breathing of the soldiers and the snap of a damaged branch, descended once more upon the clearing. The squad quickly regrouped. Novak approached the slain creature, taking tissue and blood samples with a specialized kit. Hernandez performed a rapid damage assessment of the exoskeletons. Multiple deep scratches on the armor across the board, sir. Rock's got a damaged servo on his left arm, but mobility's intact, he reported. None of the soldiers were seriously injured, but adrenaline still pulsed through their veins. First blood had been drawn. It was chillingly clear. The enemy was not only strong and fast, but also possessed tactical cunning. The forest began to thin, giving way to the first signs of civilization. Abandoned logging tracks, leaning fences, and then the first houses of the town emerged in the pre-dawn twilight. An eerie, unnatural silence enveloped the place. The town was completely dark. Not a single light shone in any window, no sound of a running generator. Only the pale light of the waning moon, filtering through ragged clouds, illuminated a scene of devastation. As the squad drew closer, signs of recent panic and violence became apparent. Overturned cars blocked streets, shop windows were shattered, debris littered the roads, remnants of primitive barricades hastily erected by residents in a desperate attempt to defend themselves. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of smoke, decay, and that same wild, musky odor they had first encountered in the woods. Moving down the main street leading into town, the squad found the first line of makeshift defenses. These weren't just simple barricades. Ghost Riley, using his image-enhanced optics, spotted suspicious ground disturbance in front of one pile of debris. Smith Hernandez confirmed their fears with a compact mine detector, a camouflaged pit trap, deep enough to pose a serious threat even to an exoskeleton, lined with sharpened stakes at the bottom. A little further on, they discovered tripwires attached to hand grenades, clearly scavenged from the bodies of local police or perhaps National Guardsmen, if any had arrived before communications failed. The traps were crude but cleverly placed, positioned where one might instinctively seek cover or try to flank. Riley and Hernandez methodically disarmed them while the others provided cover. The exoskeletons made short work of the physical barricades, clearing a path. The squad selected the first house on the outskirts for clearing and assessment. A small, single-story home, typical of the southern states, with peeling white paint. The front door was smashed inward, torn from its hinges. Demarco entered first, pistol ready. The others followed, fanning out through the rooms. What they saw confirmed their darkest assumptions. Chaos reigned within. Furniture was overturned, walls spattered with blood. Dark, almost black stains in the weak beams of their tack lights. The floor showed signs of a struggle, of bodies being dragged. In the living room lay the savaged remains of two people, unrecognizable. The level of brutality was extreme. The stench of death mingled with the acrid scent of the beasts, creating a nauseating atmosphere. In a child's bedroom, scattered toys and a blood-soaked teddy bear lay on the floor. It was starkly evident that for most of the town's inhabitants, there had been no escape. Just as the squad exited the house and began moving deeper down the first street, lined with similar homes and small shops, the attack came. This time, it was coordinated, exploiting the urban environment. Werewolf figures flickered in darkened second-story windows, on the roofs of low buildings, in the mouths of alleys. They didn't charge head-on as they had in the forest. Instead, they employed hit-and-run tactics, striking quickly and then vanishing, using the labyrinth of streets and buildings to maneuver. Several creatures burst from a dark alley, attacking the rearmost soldier, then instantly disappeared around the corner of the opposite building. Another monster leaped from a storefront roof, aiming for Rock Johnson's head. The soldiers reacted professionally, but the urban setting restricted their maneuverability and the effectiveness of their heavy weapons. Rock spun and unleashed a long burst from his machine gun at the roof the attacker had jumped from. 338 silver-cord rounds tore through shingles and wood, eliciting a furious howl from within. A soldier attacked from the flank used his exoskeleton's hydraulic arm to hurl the creature yards away, sending it crashing into a house wall with a sickening thud. But the werewolves adapted quickly. They purposefully targeted weak points on the exoskeletons. Joint actuators, optical sensors on the helmets, external power conduits and hydraulic lines. One monster managed to clamp its jaws onto an armored hose on Smith Hernandez's leg before Riley dropped it with a short burst. Captain Demarco moved between his soldiers, his speed and precision crucial in maintaining their cohesion. He anticipated attacks, appearing wherever the line was weakest, his sword and pistol a blur of motion. He issued short, sharp commands over the internal comms, coordinating fire and movement, preventing the enemy from breaking them into smaller groups. He personally eliminated 2 werewolves attempting an ambush from a darkened doorway before they could strike. His centuries of experience in close-quarters combat proved invaluable, but even his presence couldn't prevent loss. In the chaos of gunfire and rapid movement, Specialist Randall, a relatively new addition to Night Watch, became momentarily separated from the main group during an evasive maneuver. His short cry and a burst of static over the comm channel were the last they heard from him. Demarco and Rock Johnson immediately pushed towards his last known position around the corner of a small shop. They found only his exoskeleton, heavily damaged, the front torso plate ripped open. A wide blood trail smeared the dusty road, leading into a dark alley. Randall's body was gone. The realization of their first casualty struck the squad's morale hard. This was no longer just a cleanup operation. It was personal. The squad advanced slowly towards the town center. Intelligence suggested the Alpha's lair and the main pack concentration might be located there, possibly in the town hall, the local church, or the police station. The streets here were wider, but the destruction seemed even more extensive. Charred skeletons of cars, barricades made from buses and heavy equipment, blown-out windows in the town's taller buildings, everything spoke of fiercer fighting having occurred here earlier. Despite the apparent emptiness, the feeling of being constantly watched never left them. Figures darted at the edge of their vision, on rooftops, in dark windows, but vanished the moment weapons or light swung towards them. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant crackle of fire somewhere deeper in the town and the sound of their own footsteps. The enemy shifted tactics again. Physical attacks became less frequent, replaced by psychological pressure. From dark alleys and ruined buildings came sounds, low, guttural growls that morphed into soul-chilling howls, seeming to penetrate the very armor of the exoskeletons. Sometimes the sounds changed. The soldiers heard what might have been imitations of human cries for help. Men's, women's, even children's voices. The voices were distorted, wrong, but the very attempt to mislead them, to play on their rescuer instincts, frayed their nerves. At times, harsh, snarling laughter echoed from the darkness, punctuated by broken English phrases, "Iron men, soon meet, hide, we find." It was calculated terror, designed to break their will and force a mistake. Suddenly, Novak's bioscanners registered faint but stable life signs from the diner on the corner of the square. Several signatures clustered together, unmoving. Elevated heart rates, normal body temperatures, humans. Captain, 5 potential survivors, basement of Joe's diner, Novak reported. The decision was difficult. It could be a trap. Leaving them meant condemning them to certain death. Demarco weighed the risks briefly. Johnson, Riley, outside cover. Novak, Smith with me. Move fast. The squad split. Demarco, Novak, and Hernandez entered the diner. Inside, everything was wrecked, but the basement door was barricaded from within. After a quick exchange of coded signals, the door creaked open. 5 civilians huddled in the basement. 2 men, 2 women, and a teenager. All were injured, terrified beyond reason, pressed together in a dark corner. Their eyes widened in horror at the sight of the armed figures in exoskeletons. It was then that the trap sprang. As Demarco's group tried to quickly assess the survivors' condition and figure out an evacuation plan, the sound of furious combat erupted outside. Simultaneously, several werewolves burst into the diner through shattered windows, and a back entrance the squad hadn't known existed. They had clearly been waiting for part of the team's attention to be diverted. A close-quarters battle ignited in the cramped space of the diner, among overturned tables and the counter. The exoskeletons, so effective in open terrain, felt clumsy here. The werewolves used their agility, leaping onto tables, attacking from multiple angles. The civilians in the basement screamed in terror. Demarco realized they were caught. Holding the position while protecting the civilians was impossible. Fall back. Cover the civilians. Johnson, Riley, suppressive fire on the main entrance. He commanded over the comms. A tactical withdrawal began. Novak and Hernandez tried to hustle the survivors out of the basement while returning fire. Outside, Johnson and Riley laid down a hail of bullets, trying to keep more werewolves from storming the building. One civilian, a middle-aged man, panicked and bolted from behind an overturned table, only to be immediately snatched and dragged into the darkness of a side hallway. His scream cut off abruptly. During the retreat, a werewolf managed to leap onto Hernandez's back, claws tearing at the power cables on the exoskeleton's spine. Hernandez roared in pain and fury, trying to dislodge the creature. Riley dropped the werewolf with a precise shot, but Smith's suit was severely damaged, sparks showering from the torn plating. To give the others a chance to exit the diner and fall back to a more defensible position, Demarco stepped towards 3 werewolves blocking the way out. He moved with impossible speed, his sword and pistol a blur. He took several deep scratches on his arms and torso, which, to the horror of the civilians watching through the doorway, sealed themselves almost instantly, leaving only thin red lines. He blocked, parried, counterattacked, using pillars and the bar counter for cover and leverage. His furious assault carved a brief opening through which Novak and Riley managed to pull the remaining 4 civilians and the injured Hernandez. Johnson covered their retreat with sustained machine gun fire. The squad fell back across the square to the old bank building, its thick stone walls and massive steel door offering a defensible position they managed to secure from the inside. The respite was brief and bitter. The engagement's toll was grim. Specialist Randall confirmed KIA. Corporal Hernandez seriously wounded, his exoskeleton needing urgent repair. They had rescued 4 civilians, but at the cost of another soldier's life, Randall, and significant ammunition expenditure. Morale was low. Demarco surveyed his exhausted soldiers, the wounded Hernandez receiving first aid from Novak, and the terrified civilians huddled in a corner of the bank lobby. Standard clearing tactics had clearly failed. This enemy was too smart, too strong, and utilized the terrain too well. They needed a new strategy. Their temporary sanctuary in the bank offered a brief pause, but not safety. Outside, growls and the scrape of claws on stone could be heard. The werewolves weren't leaving them alone. Captain Demarco gathered the remaining combat-effective members, Johnson, Novak, and Riley, for an urgent council while Novak finished stabilizing Hernandez. A direct assault on the rest of the town with our current strength and condition is suicide, Demarco stated, his voice even, though his eyes betrayed the strain. They know the terrain, they use ambush tactics and psychological warfare. Standard clearing protocols are ineffective here. Our only viable objective now is the pack leader. Eliminate the Alpha, and the pack will likely lose coordination, descend into chaos. That's our chance. The mission objective shifted. Not clearing the town, but a targeted strike to kill the leader and rescue any hostages if they still existed. They needed to pinpoint the Alpha's location. The intelligence gathering phase began. Ghost Riley, using climbing gear from his kit, managed to ascend to the bank's roof via a maintenance hatch. From there, concealed by the parapet, he began observing the town through his powerful optics, marking enemy movements and trying to identify a center of activity. Meanwhile, Banshee Novak deployed a portable EW suite and signal analyzer. She attempted to boost and filter the strange interference and sounds they had been detecting. She also launched 2 mini-drones equipped with thermal cameras to survey the immediate blocks. The drones were small and fast, but the risk of detection and destruction was high. One vanished from radar almost immediately, likely shot down. The second managed to transmit several short video streams before meeting the same fate. Data began to trickle in, forming a clearer picture. Captain Demarco, standing by a shattered window and peering into the darkness with his preternatural vision, detected a concentration of scent and sound emanating from the northeast edge of town. Riley from the roof confirmed. The highest concentration of werewolf activity was centered around the old Sawmill, a large industrial complex on a slight rise near the river. Thermal signatures there were numerous, and one stood out due to its size and intensity. Data from the second drone, captured just before its destruction, showed multiple figures patrolling the Sawmill perimeter. The conclusion was unavoidable. The Alpha's lair was there. Just then, Novak succeeded. She managed to isolate and partially decrypt one of the signals caught on the shortwave bands. It wasn't a pure radio signal, more like some form of low-frequency vocalization, amplified and transmitted through an unknown means. The voice was guttural, snarling, the words spoken in broken, accented English, but the meaning was clear. It was the Alpha, issuing commands to its pack. It spoke of the iron men in the bank, of patience, of the fresh meat waiting for them at the sawmill. The voice was filled with primal fury, but also a calculating intelligence and a clear, chilling pleasure in the unfolding events. It confirmed their worst fears. The Alpha wasn't just a powerful beast. It was a sentient and cruel commander. The final video fragment from the downed drone delivered a horrifying discovery. The camera had managed a brief glimpse into one of the main sawmill building's windows. The image was blurry, lasting less than a second, but it clearly showed several human figures locked inside a large metal cage, similar to those used for transporting large animals. A massive dark shadow flickered near the cage for an instant. There were hostages, alive, and clearly being used as bait, or perhaps as insurance for the Alpha. Retreat or calling for extraction was no longer an option. Captain Demarco quickly formulated a plan of attack. Risky, audacious, but the only viable option given the circumstances. The squad would split. The main assault element, himself and Sergeant Rock Johnson, would create a loud, diversionary attack on the sawmill's main entrance. Their task was to draw as much enemy attention as possible. Simultaneously, the second, mobile element, Ghost Riley and Banshee Novak, Hernandez would remain at the bank with the civilians. His condition precluded assault, but he could maintain comms and cover their rear if needed. Would attempt to infiltrate the complex from the rear, by the river, locate the hostages, and free them. Final preparations commenced. Remaining ammunition was redistributed. Silver rounds and grenades were now worth their weight in gold. Novak transferred some of her medical supplies to Riley. Johnson checked his machine gun and readied several fragmentation grenades for maximum noise. Demarco silently inspected his sword and pistol. He looked at his soldiers. Fatigue and stress were evident in their movements, but their resolve was absolute. "We came here for them," Demarco said quietly, his voice firm, devoid of emotion, yet each word carried weight. "We cannot abandon the hostages. We leave with them or we die beside them. No retreat. Execute." He nodded, and the two teams began moving out from the temporary shelter of the bank into the pre-dawn gloom, each towards their objective. The operation commenced at first light, as the initial rays of sun barely touched the horizon, painting the sky in dull shades of gray and rose. The main assault team, Captain Demarco and Sergeant Johnson, approached the sawmill's main entrance, wide gates leading into the complex grounds. On Demarco's signal, Johnson opened fire with his heavy machine gun. Long bursts of silver-cored rounds slammed into the gates and suspected werewolf positions on watchtowers and behind log piles. Simultaneously, Demarco threw two flashbang grenades, which detonated with deafening concussions and blinding flashes, disorienting any nearby enemies. The noise and chaos of the diversionary attack immediately drew the attention of the sawmill's occupants. Furious howls erupted from the darkened workshops and surrounding grounds, and dozens of dark figures surged towards the source of the commotion. At the same moment, the infiltration team, Riley and Novak, reached the rear of the complex facing the river. Here, the main workshop wall ran close to the water's edge. Using tactical grappling hooks and ropes, Riley quickly scaled onto the roof of a low annex, then helped Novak up. Their movements were as silent as possible, aided by their exoskeleton's stealth systems. They located a maintenance hatch on the main workshop roof. Its grate yielded to Riley's hydraulic cutters. Rappelling down inside, they found themselves on metal catwalks high beneath the ceiling of a vast, echoing space. Below, in the dim light, industrial machinery, conveyor belts, and stacks of processed lumber were visible. They spotted several werewolves patrolling the floor below and began moving cautiously along the catwalks, striving for silence. One patroller looked up as if hearing something. Riley instantly raised his suppressed rifle and fired a precise shot. The werewolf jerked and fell silently behind a machine. Meanwhile, a fierce battle raged at the main entrance. Johnson, using the remnants of a concrete barrier for cover, laid down continuous fire, holding back the tide of werewolves attempting to breach the gates. His machine gun scythed through the front ranks of attackers, but there were too many. The silver rounds inflicted grievous wounds, but fury and sheer numbers were on the enemy's side. Captain Demarco fought alongside him, moving with blinding speed, picking off those trying to flank Johnson, engaging in short, lethal duels with any that got too close. His sword inflicted deep, cauterizing wounds, while his pistol finished off the injured. Johnson's exoskeleton armor absorbed claw and bite impacts, but warning indicators for multiple system damages were already flashing. "Captain, we can't hold them here much longer. Too many!" Johnson yelled over the internal comms, reloading his weapon, breaching inward. Demarco responded. Riley and Novak's team continued their progress along the upper catwalks. The air here was thick with the stench of blood, sawdust, and the feral reek of the beasts. They passed several rooms that had clearly served the werewolves as larders or feeding dens. Gnawed bones, scraps of clothing, and personal effects of victims littered the floor. The atmosphere was oppressive. Every dark corner seemed to hold danger. Finally, they heard faint moans and weeping coming from a large area in the center of the workshop. Moving closer, they saw the cage, the same one from the drone footage. Inside were 4 hostages, 2 men and 2 women emaciated in torn clothing, bearing marks of abuse. 2 large werewolves guarded the cage, squatting nearby, gnawing on something dark. Simultaneously, Demarco and Johnson, using their last smoke grenade for cover, managed to breach the main workshop through a side door that Demarco kicked down with immense force. Once inside, they were met by a fresh wave of attackers. Demarco made a decision. "Johnson, hold this corridor. Don't let them advance. I'm going for the Alpha." Johnson nodded, took position in a narrow passage between 2 large machines, and opened fire again on the pressing horde. Demarco, guided by sound and scent, plunged deeper into the workshop, towards the area where he sensed the pack's core power resided. Johnson found himself in a desperate fight. The corridor was narrow, offering a tactical advantage. But werewolves scrambled from multiple directions, trying to overwhelm his position. He fired until the belt ran dry. Reloading took precious seconds, during which 2 monsters reached him. He met them with blows from his exoskeleton, but one managed to damage the hydraulics of his right arm. The machine gun became useless. Johnson discarded it and drew his combat knife. His exoskeleton took hit after hit, armor cracking, systems failing one by one. Comms with Demarco and Riley's team became intermittent due to intense interference within the building. At the same time, Riley and Novak initiated the rescue. "I've got left, you take right," Riley whispered. 2 suppressed shots, one from Riley's rifle, one from Novak's pistol, struck the guards in the head almost simultaneously. The werewolves collapsed without a sound. Novak immediately rushed to the cage, working on the lock while Riley scanned the area, ready for more enemies. The lock was complex, but Novak, using tools from her kit, managed it. The cage door swung open. The hostages were free, but weakened and terrified. They needed to get out now. Novak quickly triaged the freed hostages. All were dehydrated. 2 had lacerations, clearly from claws, but thankfully not too deep. She applied antiseptic and quick field dressings from her medkit. We need to move. Quickly and quietly as you can. Stay with me, she said firmly, trying not to frighten them further. Riley took point, his rifle sweeping the dark corners of the workshop. He chose their exfiltration route, through a side exit they had spotted earlier, leading towards the river. It was the shortest path to potential cover outside the sawmill. The group began moving slowly, supporting the weakened hostages. Meanwhile, Captain Demarco reached the largest area of the sawmill, the main cutting floor. In the center, on a raised platform where a control console likely once stood, he saw his target. The Alpha. The creature was immense, significantly larger than the common werewolves, its dark fur matted with scars from countless battles. It stood bipedally, its massive shoulders and chest conveying monstrous strength. Its yellow eyes burned not just with animalistic hunger, but with clear, conscious intelligence and profound hatred. Flanking it stood 3 other large werewolves, its personal guard, the pack's elite. "I smell old blood in you, leech," the Alpha snarled, its voice like grinding stones. It recognized Demarco, or rather what he was. "You came far to die, far from your castles?" Demarco didn't reply. He drew his sword. The duel began. First, the 3 bodyguards charged. They were faster and stronger than the average werewolf, moving with coordination. Demarco dodged, parried, attacked. His movements were fluid, lethal. Silver slugs from his pistol found weak points. The sword severed clawed hands, pierced hearts. The fight was short but savage. Within half a minute, the 3 guards lay dead or dying at their leader's feet. Now he faced the Alpha alone. At the same moment, Riley and Novak's group neared the side exit. But they were spotted. Werewolves patrolling outside, drawn by the fighting at the main entrance, had regrouped and now converged on them, attempting to intercept the group with the hostages. Riley opened fire with his rifle, trying to hold them back while Novak pushed the hostages outside. The situation became critical. There were too many werewolves. In the distance, down the corridor he held, Sergeant Johnson still fought. The sounds of metal impacting bone and furious snarls echoed from his position. He was still alive, but his ammo was gone. He fought hand to hand, using his damaged exoskeleton as both weapon and shield. He knew his job: prevent reinforcements from reaching the Alpha or the extraction team. The battle between Demarco and the Alpha reached its apex. It was a clash not just of physical might, but of centuries of experience versus primal power. The Alpha attacked with berserker fury, its claws gouging deep rents in the concrete floor and machinery. Its regeneration was astounding, minor bullet wounds and sword cuts sealed in seconds. It used its mass and agility, trying to overwhelm Demarco to catch him in its massive jaws. Demarco countered with speed, precision, and tactical calculation. He used the environment: machines, conveyor belts, stacks of lumber for evasion and counterattacks. His rune-etched sword left wounds on the Alpha's body that healed slower, smoking upon contact with the monster's flesh. Point-blank pistol shots staggered the Alpha but didn't stop it. The workshop floor became an arena for a titanic struggle, sparks, debris, and drops of dark blood flying everywhere. The critical moment arrived. The Alpha, putting all its strength into one blow, managed to break through Demarco's guard. Its massive claw tore through the captain's side, leaving a deep wound that bled more freely than usual and healed agonizingly slowly. Demarco staggered, feeling a wave of weakness. In that same instant, Riley and Novak's group found themselves nearly surrounded at the exit. Riley was out of ammo in his primary magazine. Several werewolves broke through, getting dangerously close to the hostages. From the corridor where Johnson fought, a deafening explosion roared, followed by the death cries of several werewolves. Then silence. Johnson, realizing he couldn't hold the line and that the evac team was in jeopardy, had detonated the emergency demolition charge on his damaged exoskeleton, sacrificing himself to take out several enemies and block the passage with wreckage. Johnson's sacrifice bought Demarco a fraction of a second. Gathering his remaining strength, ignoring the pain, he saw how fury and the anticipation of victory had made the Alpha careless. It lunged forward for the killing blow. Demarco dodged at the last possible moment and, putting all his preternatural strength and body weight behind the thrust, drove his runic sword deep into the Alpha's chest, aiming for the heart. The blade sank to the hilt. The Alpha let out a horrifying roar, a mix of pain, rage, and disbelief. Its eyes rolled back, its body went limp, and it crashed to the workshop floor, shaking the concrete foundation. The gigantic figure convulsed once, twice, and then lay still. The Titan had fallen. The Alpha's death didn't bring immediate silence. Instead, the remaining werewolves, sensing their leader's demise, descended into a state of chaotic rage and panic. Their primitive tactical coordination dissolved. Some, those who had been fighting Johnson near the corridor and survived the blast, turned and fled, trying to hide deeper within the sawmill or escape outside. Others, maddened by the loss of their leader, attacked with even greater ferocity but with no semblance of order. Riley and Novak, capitalizing on the enemy's confusion and Johnson's sacrifice, managed to fight off the few werewolves that had reached the exit and get the hostages clear of the building and onto the riverbank. Demarco, breathing heavily, hand pressed to the bleeding wound in his side, slowly straightened beside the fallen body of the Alpha. He raised his sword, dark ichor dripping from the blade. The surviving soldiers, Demarco, Riley, and Novak, quickly regrouped at the exit. Hernandez remained at the bank with one of the previously rescued civilians, maintaining comms. The hostages were safe, but in deep shock. Novak immediately began administering further aid, trying to calm them with quiet, confident words, while Riley established a defensive perimeter, scanning the surroundings. The rescued people's faces were pale, their eyes vacant. They were living witnesses to unspeakable horrors, and the trauma would remain with them forever. Their trembling hands, quiet sobs, and distant stares spoke volumes more than words could. Despite his wound, which was still slowly knitting itself together, Demarco took command of the final sweep. Riley, Novak, secure the perimeter around the hostages. I'll check the immediate structures. Need to ensure the immediate threat is neutralized, he ordered. He moved back towards the main workshop, pistol ready. He methodically cleared several adjacent rooms, storage areas, and administrative offices. He encountered 2 more werewolves hiding in the shadows. Disoriented, they offered little resistance. Demarco dispatched them with quick, precise shots. It seemed the primary threat within the Sawmill complex was eliminated. When Demarco rejoined the group by the river, the hardest moment arrived. The accounting of losses. Specialist Randall KIA during the approach to the town center. Sergeant Michael Rock Johnson KIA sacrificed himself to save the others during the assault on the lair. Corporal Carlos Smith Hernandez, seriously wounded, condition stable but out of action. Of the original squad, excluding the captain, only 2 remained combat effective, Riley and Novak. Half the team was gone. Riley and Novak stared silently at the river. The weight of their losses was a physical burden. Demarco went to the site of the explosion by the blocked corridor. He found Johnson's melted dog tag amidst the debris. He picked it up, clenched it silently in his fist, and slipped it into his pocket. There was no time for lengthy goodbyes. Novak deployed the secure satellite transmitter. Her fingers flew across the keypad, entering the coded request. Base, this is Banshee. Operation Sawmill complete. Target eliminated. 4 civilians recovered. Losses: 2 KIA, 1 WIA, requesting immediate medevac and support team. Coordinates attached. The reply came almost instantly. Acknowledgement received. Extraction team en route. ETA 30 minutes. Demarco approached the rescued hostages. He knelt before them, trying to make his presence less intimidating. "It's over. Help is on the way," he said quietly. "You're safe now." One of the men looked up at him. What was that? "Who are you?" Demarco paused for a second. "We're a special government unit. We were sent to neutralize a dangerous terrorist group using an unknown biological weapon to control this town. Unfortunately, we arrived too late for most." It was the official cover story, prepared for situations like this. He couldn't tell them the truth. The remaining 30 minutes passed in tense waiting. The squad established a defensive perimeter around the designated landing zone for the extraction aircraft. Demarco, Riley, and Novak stood silently, their exoskeletons scarred, stained with grime and blood, mute testaments to the brutal fight. The adrenaline of combat had subsided, replaced by a crushing weariness, grief for their fallen comrades, and the heavy knowledge of the price paid for this victory. The sun climbed higher, its rays cutting through the smoke still rising from the town's ruins. The eastern sky bled into hues of blood red. Precisely on schedule, silhouettes appeared over the treetops. 3 V-44 Night Ghost stealth tilt rotors and 1 specialized medevac helicopter bearing red crosses approached the cleared area on the riverbank near the Sawmill. The tilt rotors hovered a few feet above the ground, kicking up dust and fallen leaves, while the medevac chopper landed slightly further away. Support team members rapidly deployed from the transport bay's technicians, cleanup specialists in full hazmat suits, and medical personnel. The first priority was evacuating the wounded and the rescued civilians. Medics from the incoming team immediately set up a field triage point. They quickly assessed Corporal Hernandez, who awaited extraction at the bank under the watch of a civilian, and the 4 hostages rescued from the Sawmill. Hernandez and the 2 most severely injured hostages were the first loaded onto stretchers and transported aboard the medevac helicopter. The aircraft lifted off immediately, heading for a secure medical facility equipped to handle paranormal threat-related injuries and provide necessary psychological support and civilian isolation. The remaining 2 hostages, whose conditions were less critical, were placed in one of the tilt rotors under a medic's care. Next came the surviving members of Night Watch. Riley and Novak, removing their helmets and powering down their damaged exoskeletons, boarded one of the V-44s. Their faces were drawn, streaked with dirt and sweat. Support technicians then began carefully loading their damaged Cerberus suits and the recovered exoskeleton of Specialist Randall. The equipment was not only valuable hardware, but also a crucial source of data for analyzing armor and system effectiveness against lycanthropies. The remains of Sergeant Johnson and Specialist Randall were placed in special sealed containers and loaded onto a separate transport tilt rotor. The farewell was silent but filled with respect. Within their circle, the fallen were honored as heroes. While the primary team and casualties were evacuated, the hazmat-suited cleanup specialists began their work at the Sawmill and key engagement sites within the town. Their actions were methodical and swift. They collected biological samples from the slain werewolves, including the Alpha, meticulously documenting everything. Then, the bodies and all traces of their presence, blood, fur, claw marks on walls and ground, were treated with special chemical agents and incinerated using portable high-temperature torches. Any evidence pointing to the supernatural nature of the events had to be eradicated without a trace. Their task was to prepare the scene for the official narrative, the one that would be presented to the public and local authorities if necessary. Captain Demarco was the last to board the command tilt rotor. He paused on the ramp for a few seconds, surveying the panorama of the devastated town. Ruined homes, smoldering building remnants, empty streets, silent witnesses to the recent slaughter. His face remained impassive, but deep within his eyes a flicker of ancient weariness and sorrow surfaced for a moment. He mentally bid farewell to Johnson and Randall, 2 more names on the endless list of those lost under his command throughout his long war. Then he stepped inside and the ramp closed silently. The tilt rotor lifted smoothly into the air, setting a course back to Area 52. The preliminary debriefing began en route. Novak connected her tactical tablet to the tilt rotor's comm system, uploading the collected data: helmet cam footage, sensor readings, communication logs, preliminary analysis of the Alpha's vocalizations, and tissue samples from the first slain werewolf. Demarco contacted command via a secure channel, providing a concise verbal report on the operation's key phases, confirming mission success and reporting casualties. Discussion turned to the details of the official cover story. The bioweapon terrorist narrative seemed most plausible but required meticulous crafting and evidence planting by the cleanup crew on site. They needed to explain the disappearance of the terrorists' bodies and the specific nature of the destruction. Somewhere far below, in a classified medical facility, the rescued hostages and the wounded Hernandez received essential care. But their treatment extended beyond physical wounds. It was understood they would undergo intensive psychological rehabilitation. Part of this rehabilitation, per Area 52 protocols, could involve the use of mnemonic blockers or targeted memory alteration techniques. The truth of what happened in their town was too dangerous to leave in the minds of ordinary civilians. they would be offered and gently guided towards accepting the official story, allowing them to somehow move forward without the burden of knowing the real monsters lurking in the dark. Operational security was paramount. Returning to the sterile corridors of Area 52 felt jarring after the chaos and destruction of the abandoned town. The tilt rotors landed on the same subterranean pad from which the squad had departed what felt like an eternity ago. The wounded, including the stabilized Hernandez, were immediately transported to the base's advanced medical wing for long-term treatment and rehabilitation. The surviving soldiers, Demarco, Riley, and Novak, underwent mandatory post-mission medical evaluations and initial psychological assessments. Their battered, scratched exoskeletons were sent to technical labs for detailed battle damage analysis, identifying weaknesses and gathering data for future upgrades. The silence of the base felt deafening after the roar of battle and the howls of monsters. The following day, the official debriefing took place in the main situation room. Before Area 52's high command, a panel of stern men and women in military uniforms and civilian attire, Captain Demarco presented the full report on Operation Sawmill. He detailed the enemy's tactics, their adaptability, physical capabilities, and the confirmed sentience of the Alpha. He reported the losses, not shying away from the difficult decisions made and the cost of victory. The effectiveness of the Cerberus exoskeletons and specialized weaponry was deemed high, but the engagement also revealed vulnerabilities, particularly in close combat and against coordinated attacks targeting joints and life support systems. The conclusions were sobering. Lycanthropes of this strain represented a significantly higher threat level than previously assessed. Revisions to standard counter-protocols, development of new weapons, and refined tactics were necessary. Later, in the quiet solemnity of the base's memorial hall, where names of fallen operatives from clandestine units were etched onto walls of polished black granite, an unofficial remembrance ceremony took place. Captain Demarco, Riley, and Novak stood before two fresh inscriptions: Sergeant Michael Johnson and Specialist Mark Randall. Corporal Hernandez stood nearby on crutches, his face pale but determined. They paid silent tribute to their fallen comrades. In that silence lay more grief and camaraderie than any words could express. Demarco, as commander, felt the distinct weight of responsibility for every life lost under his watch. It was a burden he had carried for centuries. Meanwhile, in Area 52's biological labs, scientists in sterile suits studied the tissue samples recovered from the slain lycanthropes, especially the Alpha. Initial analysis confirmed their anomalous nature. Genetic markers matched no known terrestrial biosphere. Strange protein structures and cellular anomalies hinted at incredible regenerative capabilities and damage resistance. Some data suggested possible ancient artificial manipulation of their genome, or even connections to other unstudied paranormal phenomena. Preliminary findings indicated the slain Alpha might not have been the last of its kind, but merely one of many lurking in isolated corners of the globe. The threat hadn't been eliminated, merely contained. That evening, Captain Demarco was in his quarters on base, a sparse, functional room. He was alone. On the table before him lay an ancient medallion of dark silver, an artifact from his distant past, from a time when he was a mortal warrior. He stared at it, but saw not the metal. but the faces of those he had led into battle and lost over the centuries of his endless war against the dark. The victory in the small South Carolina town was significant, but it was just one battle in a war that seemingly had no end. Evil took many forms: ancient monsters, products of mad science, entities from other dimensions, but it never truly slept. The internal comm unit on his desk emitted a soft chime, a call from the command center. Demarco activated the link. The duty officer's voice was brisk and professional. "Captain, General Miller requests your presence. New intelligence has come in. Anomalous activity in Eastern Europe, Carpathian Mountains region. Series of unexplained disappearances involving tourists and locals. Energy signatures correlate with the Sawmill incident. Preparations for the next mission were already beginning." Vincent Demarco rose slowly. He straightened his uniform. The centuries of weariness and grief for the fallen hadn't vanished. They were part of him, but layered over them was an unbreakable resolve. He was ready to lead his squad into the fight once more.